So welcome in. This is Friday, March 24th, 2017, and this is another webinar in the 3D Solutions Spotlight webinar series. This month we're focusing on our SOLIDWORKS PDM professional software. My name is Jake Howard. I'm a product data management specialist here at Hawk Ridge Systems, and this particular webinar is the Sink or Swim synchronizing our files with SOLIDWORKS PDM and custom properties. So we'll have some fun with that today. I've mocked up a few examples for you just based off of customer questions and requests. So hopefully what I have is going to be relevant and give you some good ideas for when you're building in your own automation into your vaults. I would say probably, I would rate this probably to a beginner to an intermediate type of webinar. So I have a little bit of something for everyone, hopefully. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and put in a plug for our 3D Solutions Spotlight webinars. If this is your first time joining us, we do a webinar every Friday where we kind of highlight a product every month. So this month, like I said, is going to be PDM, and we actually have another upcoming webinar next week on March 31st called Take Your SOLIDWORKS PDM Experience to the Next Level. And this one is really good, I think, for existing admins. If you've already been working with the PDM software for a little bit and you're wondering how to kind of tune it and optimize it, this is going to be a really good one. So it's a lot of performance tuning for the PDM software with SQL maintenance and dispatch and just general process improvements. So that's a little bit more of an advanced one, but definitely probably has some good information for everyone. And then we also have some, all of our recorded webinars are on our website at that hawkridgesys.com/event/3D Solutions Spotlight link. So definitely feel free to go in there and check out all our past recorded webinars if you miss them live. A lot of good stuff in there, and those should be available a little bit after we do the live recording. All right. So now that I got that out of the way, let's go through our agenda for today. Like I said, I have a couple of, hopefully some good examples for you. Going to start off kind of simple and then move to the more advanced topics. So, don't worry if you're kind of newer to PDM. I'm going to start pretty basic. First example I have is going to be within SOLIDWORKS. We're going to be adding and removing our watermarks automatically in our files, and then moving on to updating our drawing title blocks in our drawings, which are, I would say, a little bit more advanced than the watermarks that we're kind of moving through. By the way, if you do have any questions, for those tuning in live, if you do have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar chat, and I can get to those after the presentation. I want to make sure that I'm getting through everything I need to get through, and then we can talk about any questions after, so we can stay on time. So that first part is going to be the SOLIDWORKS, and then we're going to move on to Microsoft Excel. And I have an example for an engineering change order document, and some people call them engineering change notices, ECN or ECO. And we're going to be updating our approver signatures and other info on those documents automatically. And then after that, we'll move on to mapping our custom property data in our Microsoft Word documents, which is a little bit tougher, in my opinion, than the Excel. It does involve a little bit of coding. But if you're not, no real requirement to be experienced coder here, just some really simple macro kind of stuff. And I'll be sure to explain as we go through. But the example I have is a training document. This is kind of from a request I get a lot from a lot of our customers wanting to keep track of who is reading a document or who has read a training document in the vault, so that we can hopefully get through that. And then my last kind of more advanced example has to do with XML, or extensible markup language, using XML files as documents. And this has kind of been a little bit of a push from SOLIDWORKS to start recommending using XML files in some cases, instead of Microsoft Office, Word, or Excel files. I put a question mark after that one, so hopefully we'll get to that if we have time at the end, because I think that's pretty interesting, and hopefully that'll be helpful for you. All right. So I'll go ahead and just get into the short PowerPoint, and then the rest of it will be kind of a hands-on how to set up kind of thing. So I want to start off pretty basic. What are custom properties and why do we care about custom properties? And I guess I'll start. Custom properties are a way for us to maintain our metadata or information about our files, whether that's inside the vault or even if you don't have a vault. Just in Windows, you have your own custom properties. Obviously, PDM kind of takes that a step further and really makes custom properties a lot more valuable in my opinion, but custom properties do have their uses outside the vault as well. So the example I have here is for SOLIDWORKS files. If you're familiar with SOLIDWORKS, you probably have taken a look at the custom properties dialog, looking something like that. And so we're representing metadata for our SOLIDWORKS file. And particularly for SOLIDWORKS, you may have configuration-specific custom properties. So these may depend on maybe if you have 5 different configurations in your file, each one may have different dimensions, different materials, that different weights and all that kind of stuff, and maybe a different description per configuration-specific custom property. So here we can see that I'm viewing the overall custom properties for the file, but then you also have a configuration-specific tab, and this is kind of unique to SOLIDWORKS files. You probably wouldn't have any configuration-specific files or configuration-specific custom properties for your Microsoft Office files, for example. These can also be manually entered, or they can be calculated automatically. So a couple examples that I have here are weight or material. In this case, like let's say the description custom property, this is generally a custom property you're going to want to enter in manually. It's not something that can be generated automatically. Needs some kind of user input. So that's generally a manual process, entering in the description for the file. But some examples like weight or material, I have a weight custom property here being calculated in the file by this SW-mass built-in property within SOLIDWORKS. So I'm not writing that in every time. It calculates that and evaluates it. In this case, it's 14,000 kilograms. And then same thing for material. In this case, I don't have a material, but if you were to add a material custom property, you could have that generated automatically as well. But not just SOLIDWORKS files. Custom properties are also, like I mentioned, available for non-SOLIDWORKS files as well. So for example, this PowerPoint that I'm working on here, the Sink or Swim PowerPoint, if you right-click that, and you may have viewed the properties and the details of that file, you can see over here in the upper section that I have some properties related to that file. And these are custom properties, as kind of the name suggests. They're properties defined by us, not just properties that are generated automatically with the file. So we still want to maintain custom property data about these files, and I'll show maybe why in the next slide. But they're manually entered for the most part. SOLIDWORKS files, you may have automatically calculated values for your custom properties, but generally for things like title or document number in your documents, that's going to be kind of more of a manual process entering those in. So the big question, why do we care about custom properties? Great, so I can define information about my file within that file. How is that useful to me? Well, if you don't have a vault, honestly, probably not that useful for you. File searching is an example of something that you can do whether you're inside or outside the vault, that custom properties can kind of help with. So the example I came up with was search filtering within Windows. So I'm not sure if you knew this. I didn't actually know this before going in, or maybe I forgot. But you can actually search on custom properties rather than the file name in the Windows search bar up here in the upper right of your Explorer window. So here I'm searching on the custom property of title. I'm searching for Sink or Swim. And this might be valuable if, let's say you had a large file set where you had folders that may have files with the same names in them. Maybe you want to be more specific than searching on the file name and then looking through all of the files that meet that name. Maybe you want to have a title custom property that you can search on that's more specific within those files. So that's one potential use outside of the vault for custom properties. It's a bit more specific than searching on the file name, but then you kind of have to weigh that with that convenience with maintaining that custom property data yourself. You're going to have to be the one that enter in the title custom property and create the tags for that file. So in my opinion, not that useful, but it does have its uses. With SOLIDWORKS PDM, that becomes much more useful using custom property mapping, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. And this is writing data directly onto our files. And in a lot of cases with PDM, we're writing this data directly onto the files without the user even knowing it or without the user even touching the file. And that's a big part of the power behind some of the automation in the PDM system that we're going to be taking advantage of. And like I mentioned, some examples of this would be updating our notes on our SOLIDWORKS files, modifying text in Microsoft Office files directly, or even automatically generating dates or other variable data to our documents so that the user doesn't have to spend time typing those out each time they create a new document. Maybe you have a template file that is used to populate custom property data as your file moves through your process or through your workflow. And we're going to be setting that up from scratch here in this presentation so you can have an idea of what that's going to take. And then I also wanted to just clarify, when we're talking about custom property mapping, we're really talking about syncing. So it's not only this one-way mapping between the data card in our PDM system and the custom property data in our files. It's also the other way. So it's a two-way mapping or a syncing between the custom properties and the data card. So any information that gets entered or generated in the data card gets pushed to the custom properties of the file and vice versa. All right, so let's take a look at this, what this is going to look like when we're setting it up for our own vaults. Go ahead and minimize that. And the first example I wanted to take a look at was in SOLIDWORKS, like I mentioned, we're going to be adding and removing a watermark based on where that file is in our process. So with the PDM system, you can be very specific about your permissions. So you can say, I only want certain people to have certain access at certain times for this file. Maybe when that file is in an under editing or work in process state, maybe I want to give everyone access to make changes to it, and then kind of lock it down as it moves through your workflow and finally gets approved. But let's say maybe you want to send that file out of the vault, or you really want to be sure about making sure your manufacturing doesn't take that drawing and run with it if it's not if it hasn't been approved. So you want to make it really obvious to everyone viewing that file, or even if it gets printed out, that file is in a work in process state. So we can do that using a watermark, and I'll go ahead and load that up. If I go to File, New, I'm just going to look at the default template for SOLIDWORKS, but you may have your own templates that you want to edit and add this to, so that when people create new drawings, this is automatically added to those drawings. So first thing we're going to want to do is add a layer onto our drawing. And if you're not familiar with layers, these are just a way to separate the content of our file so that we're writing the correct data and adding the correct annotations and it's easier to maintain. And the way you would add a layer is using the Layers toolbar. And there's a couple of ways to add that. You can go down to the bottom bar here, right click, and you should have a layer toolbar option to enable, and that should enable that little drop down there. You also have the option to go View, Toolbars, and Layer, so either way. But once I do this, if I select that drop down, you can see you have that one format layer. We're going to actually add our own layer for just the watermark. So I'll select the Layer Properties button, and this will allow us to add a new layer there. And I'm going to call this one Watermark. And this gives us some options for whether we want that layer to be visible or not, and whether we want that layer to be visible when printed. And we'll probably want to enable both. And I'll say OK there. and that created a new watermark. So anything that we add now to the drawing is on that watermark layer and can be added and removed as needed. All right, so first thing I'm going to do under the annotation tab here, I'm going to add a note so that watermark can get added as an annotation. I'm going to add it just down towards the lower left down there, and I want this thing to be big, so I'm going to go ahead and blow this up to about 300 font. And I want it to be bright red, so I'm going to change that color so it's really obvious this file is not an approved file. And we're going to be adding and removing this note, the text in this note, as it moves through our process. First of all, let's go ahead and over here on the left, if I change that angle of that note so that it kind of spans across the drawing, I'm going to change that to 35 degrees rather than a perfect 45, because this drawing is not perfectly square, so kind of want it to go at an angle over there. And I'm going to select the link to property button, and what this allows me to do is link that note to a custom property in the drawing, so that whatever the value of the custom property in the drawing is, that's what the note is going to display. And I can select a property from this drop-down. Right now I don't have any custom properties really associated with this file, other than the SW format size, but I have a bunch of built-in evaluations here that I can choose from. In this case, I want to define a custom property, so I'm going to add my own, and I can do that using this File Properties button, and that'll open up my custom properties summary information window. I'm going to add my own property in here called Watermark. And I'm going to want the text of this watermark to be for reference only. All right, that looks good. I'll say OK there. And then it's not going to do anything until I connect that note to that custom property. So watch what happens when I select my new custom property from that dropdown. That note then gets populated with that text. So I'll say OK there. Close out of my note, and that looks like a pretty good spot. You can move it around as needed if you want, but that looks good to me. So I'll go ahead and save my drawing out. I'm going to save that directly into my Sink or Swim vault here. I'm going to call this Watermark example. And you may save this out as a template for other files. I'm just going to save it just for our purposes, just as a normal file. All right. So that's saved into the vault, and then I'll check it in with my PDM add-in here by selecting that file and saying check in. Okay, great. So I submitted that file to the vault, and now we're going to need to make some changes on the PDM side so that PDM knows to write data to that custom property, which will then update that note. So I'll go ahead and close out of my drawing here and minimize SOLIDWORKS and browse into my administration tool. All right, so first thing we're going to want to set up, there are three different areas that we want to update in the vault. We're going to want to create our variable in the variables section. Then we're going to want to add that variable to our data card for our drawings. And then we're going to want to add an action to our workflow so that the correct information gets written to that variable as the file gets passed through our workflow. So first thing, right-click variables. I'm going to create a new variable. This one is going to be called Watermark. And the really important section down here is this attributes section. And this is where, for all of my examples, we're going to be using this. This is where we're going to be pushing our data from our vault into the custom property of the file. So I'm going to say new attribute here. And it's going to ask me what block name do you want to use. And this is just the type of data that you want to that you're writing to. So in this case, I'm writing to custom property, and that's one word, custom property. And the attribute name is the name of the custom property I'm writing to. So I'm going to say watermark. Makes sense. And then I can define which extensions I want this mapping to be valid for. In this case, just drawings. So SLD_DRW. Looks good. And I'll say OK there to create that watermark variable. And that's added to my list. And now that we've created that variable with that mapping, we can go ahead and add that watermark to our data card for our SOLIDWORKS drawings files. So I'll go up to my cards node and edit that card. Should be, yeah, drawings. So you can see that I've added a form down here for watermark, or a control, which is an edit box control, and I've connected it to that watermark variable that I created. And this should be all that's needed. I have made this variable read-only so that my user can't edit it manually, and it's going to be only an automatic process, but it's up to you kind of what settings you want to pick for that control. All right, so that looks good. Once I'm done editing that and it looks good to me, I'll save it out. So that's should be all that's needed on the card side. And finally, we'll want to add an action to our workflow. So browse down in my workflow here for my CAD files. And I have a pretty basic CAD files workflow here. Files start out in my under editing state and then move through approval until they get approved. And then if they need to be re-released, then they move through this loop here. Pretty standard engineering workflow. In this case, just for our example, I'm going to edit this no approval required transition so that as soon as the file passes through this no approval required transition, the watermark text gets written to the file, removed from the file. And then I'm in this editing required. As soon as the file passes into this under editing state, I want it to have that for reference only watermark, so I'm going to add that to the edit required transition. So I'll add that first. If I select that editing required, I'll add an action with that actions tab there. Add action, and this is going to be an action of type set variable. And I'm going to connect that to my new watermark variable. So that each time that file passes through this transition, I want it to write the value to that watermark variable for reference only. And you can add a description for it. Add watermark. Looks good. So I'll say OK and exit out of that. And then for this no approval required transition, I'm going to add one more action there. And this one is going to be called, for set variable, I'm going to name this one add watermark. Tie that to my watermark variable. And then I'm going to want to write that value back into the file. So for reference only. So we're going to be updating that watermark variable with that value. I'll say OK there. OK. And that should be all that's needed. Go ahead and save that document. And then I will go ahead and test this out by browsing into my vault. Have my watermark example drawing there. Take a look at the preview. As it updates. There we go. So it has that for reference only watermark on it right now, but as I pass it through my workflow, that should be removed. So if I right click it and change the state for no approval required, Oh, looks like watermark stayed on there for some reason. Let's see what we're doing. Oh, I'm sorry, I did it in reverse. So as we want to, or as we're moving it to our approved state, we can remove the value, and as we're moving it into our, under editing, we're adding the value. Sorry, I got those mixed up. We can try that one more time. I'm gonna go ahead and roll that back really quickly. And we'll see that one more time. From under editing, no approval required. There we go, and it clears our watermark as it moves through our process. And then that watermark should be added back if that file was rejected and moved back into our under editing state. So that's kind of the basics of adding and removing watermarks automatically. Open that. Actually, I'm going to check that file back out because we're also going to be editing the title block of that file. Just so to review, it's kind of a four-step process. So we're adding that watermark note onto our file, connected to the custom property for watermark. Then we're adding our watermark variable in PDM. And we're tying that watermark to control on our data card. And then we're updating that data card using our workflow actions. And the same kind of process kind of applies to adding information to our title block. So if I zoom into my title block here, I can see generally what we want to do with our title blocks. We want to keep track of information about the model contained in our file, and we can definitely do this. I'm going to go ahead and insert, let's see, insert a file here. So I'll say insert drawing view, and I'm going to insert a model, just as an example to show for your drawings what you'd want to insert into the file, or what you'd want to set up for the mapping of that. I'm going to add this assembly here. Don't want to check that out. I think it's a pretty good size assembly, so it's loading up. There we go. I'll add a drawing view there, or excuse me, a model view. Oop. Good enough. Add a couple there, why not? There we go. Okay, so now that I have a model view in there, what we're going to want to do is actually pull the custom property data out of the model. We don't want to use the custom property data in our drawing. We want to use the custom property data from the model inside the drawing. And that's a little bit of a different mapping than you would see with the watermark in the drawing. So first step, what we're going to want to do is edit that sheet format so that we can add to our title block. Delete that out, and this is going to be called description. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, so I'm going to add another note under that description so that we can tie that note to our custom property in our model view. So I'm going to say new note, right underneath description. You can set the font to whatever you want. I'm gonna keep it a decent size, 16. Looks good to me. And then again, I'm going to tie this to the property. Here is going to be a little bit different. Instead of using the current documents custom property, we're going to use the model found here. And we can use a selected component or other drawing view to specify the model we want, or we can use the drawing view specified in sheet properties. So either way, I'll go ahead and add a file property here. Looks like it's already populated with a bunch of the information for our file, but we're going to go ahead and add, or we already have this description variable, so if it wasn't there, we could add that if that's something we want to keep track of. So that mountain scooter assembly is what we want. Say OK, and we'll tie it to that description custom property so that it updates with that information. All right, that looks good. So similar process there, but a little bit different on the PDM side. So I'll go ahead and save that out in my model or in my drawing. Go ahead and check it in. And that'll submit my change to the vault. All right, so just like we did with our watermark, we're also going to need to add these variable and mapping into our vault. So if I go browse over to my admin tool and take a look at my description variable, go ahead and add a new attribute in here. And remember, we don't actually want to pull from the custom property necessarily of the drawing. We want to pull from the custom property of the model contained in the drawing. So instead of using the custom property, we're going to use a PRP sheet mapping. So that's that $ PRP sheet. And remember, the attribute name is going to be the custom property value, or the custom property name. So it's going to be description. And we want this to be valid only for drawing files, so SLD_DRW. All right, and then we're going to want to add one more attribute in here. This one is going to be for custom property. Again, tied to description. And we want the custom property for description to update for all of our SOLIDWORKS files, so parts, assemblies, and drawings in this case. So that looks good. We have a PRP sheet mapping for our drawings and a custom property for all files. Because we still want to keep track of our drawings description, but we also want to map that description of our part contained in the model into the drawing, into the title block. So we'll say OK. All right, now I want to add that description to my SOLIDWORKS part and assembly card. So I don't have a description control in there yet, so I'm going to go ahead and add an edit box, nice and big, allow for a kind of a longer description, and I'm going to tie this one to my description variable in that upper drop down menu there. This one I'm going to leave I'm going to leave that read only unchecked because I want users to be able to update this directly from the data card. So I'll say OK there and save that out. And just like we did for the watermark, we're going to add an action. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not adding an action for our description because this is going to be entered manually into our drawing. If we wanted an action to be applied to this and have that custom property information of our model written to the title block of our drawing, we could add an action in our workflow, but in this case, just a manual kind of thing. So I've updated that. Next thing I want to do, I'm going to check out my drawing so that I can edit my data card. Oh, sorry, let's open in another window. Makes sense. I got to close out in SOLIDWORKS. check that out. And then I'll browse into the model that was contained in that drawing. This assembly. Go ahead and check that one out. And here's where I can edit that description. Maybe I'll just add a -test to the end, so that when my user updates the description or any other field, maybe a good example would be a revision field. As soon as that revision field gets incremented automatically and goes from A to B, maybe that updates the title block as well. But in this case, we're just looking at description. So I'll go ahead and check in that file to submit my change. And I'll browse back to my drawing. And we're going to open that up. So taking a look at that. And you can see this description was added as I updated the model that is contained in that drawing. Looks like I made the font a little bit too big, so it might take some playing with to get used to and get the right font and that kind of thing. But that's kind of where the fun comes in as an administrator, I think, is playing around with some of these settings. And you might have it be a multi-line description, kind of up to you how you want to add that in there. So that's adding in the custom property information from the model that is contained in the drawing. In this case, I'm editing the sheet format. There we go. So this model that's contained in the drawing is then we're writing that value to the title block of our drawing. That's a really common one, I think. Same kind of thing goes for updating a revision, or maybe a really good one for an automatic use for this would be updating the approver as that file gets approved and moves through your workflow. Maybe you're writing that user's name to the title block and the date to the title block as well. Some good examples there. Okay, so that's SOLIDWORKS. Go ahead and move on to my other examples I have here. First one is going to be the Excel. So in the example I have a template for my Excel files, which is just an engineering change order. So anytime I need to make a major change to my model, I need to fill out an engineering change order so that that can go through the proper approval process. A little bit of a similar process here than it would be for SOLIDWORKS, but I wanted to kind of highlight what that's going to look like and kind of maybe some uses for where you might want that. All right, so I've had this set up. I just pulled this offline and kind of modified it a little bit for our purposes. All of these fields, this vendor, vendor ID, manufacturing location, date, all that kind of stuff is automatically going to fill out for us. We already have that set up. And I kind of want to just, as well as these approver signatures down here. So the only one we're going to want to change is this quality assurance manager. We're going to set that up so that value gets written in there. And to do that, I can add a formula. Under the formula tabs, I'm going to edit this name manager. And you can see the other values that I've mapped to all of the fields here. I'm going to add a new one. This one is going to be called QA manager. And you can see in this lower box that it's being tied to cell K24. In this case, that's the 24th row, and the K column looks good right to that quality manager section. Say OK there. So that mapping has been added. Close out of that. Next thing we're going to want to do is add the custom property of QA manager to this Excel document. And I can do that going to File, Info, and under this Properties drop-down, I get an Advanced Properties. Select the Custom tab there. I'm going to add my own custom property. So QA Manager, one word, looks good. And for the value of that, I'm going to leave, or I'm going to, you can put any kind of base text you want. I'm just going to put an X in there for now. That value is going to change as this moves through our process. And I can say link to content there as well. So you get that nice little chain link, and that's what you'll want for mapping the Excel custom property. All right, so I'll say OK there. And if I go back, you can see, or we should, these will be updated as soon as it moves through our process. So I'll save that out again, close it, check it in. Looks good. Next thing we're going to want to do is add, in the same way, add a variable for QA Manager to our vault. I'm kind of seeing a pattern here. This is what you're going to want to do for any kind of variable mapping. So I have a QA Manager variable, add an attribute mapping. Same thing for Microsoft Office files. We'll add a custom property block, and this is going to be tied to the QA Manager attribute or custom property. Then I want this to be valid both for docx files and for docm files. Or I'm sorry, not docx, this is going to be Excel XLSX files. That looks good, so I'll say OK. Make sure that's tied to my data card for my ECO files. Under my approvers or approvals tab, I can add a control in there, tie it to my new variable for QA Manager. And you can align these as you need with the alignment tools. Kind of, I'm a little bit OCD with my labels, so I want to make sure that everything lines up properly. Let's do that. There we go. Good enough. Save that out. Oh, I'm sorry, it's tied to the request state. We want to tie it to the QA Manager. There we go. All right, I can make that a read-only field as well, since the user's not going to be updating it. And then the final step in the workflow. I have a different workflow for my ECO process here. It needs to go through several approval processes before finally being approved. The step that we want to worry about is this send to QA review. Here I'm going to set an action, set variable. I'm going to tie that to the QA Manager variable, and using this drop down on the right, I'm going to select full name. So the full name of the user approving it gets written to that QA Manager variable, which then gets pushed via custom property mapping to the file. Perfect. And each of these steps has should have a similar action, so I'm going to add set variable there. And I believe reviewed by is the one we want there. Same kind of thing. All right, so I'll save that out. And that should be good on the PDM side. So what I've actually done is I've tied this ECO example Excel to a PDM template. And we're not going to go over PDM templates today, but definitely a really powerful tool for automatically creating files. And what templates allow me to do as a user, I can actually just right-click in the white space here and say New ECO. And it'll prompt me for some values. I'm going to say Hawkridge Systems, the vendor ID, whatever you want it to be. And these may be drop downs, or these may be manually entered, however you want these done, or automatically populated. And that should automatically create a file based on the template that we added there. All right, looks good. So if I, let's go ahead and I'll check that file out and take a look at it. Awesome, so it looks like a lot of the properties that we added here are being filled out for us automatically, which is saving some time there. None of our approver values are have been filled out yet because we still need to approve the file. So let's go ahead and approve it and see what that looks like. check that file in. Send that to peer review. And then I'll just push it through just as an example to show you that QA review as well. All right, so now if I open that file, oh, looks like the value is not getting written there. Let's see what's going on here. So we're writing the full name of the user to the QA manager variable. Let's check our variable there. So it looks like we're making this valid for, it's because this is an XLS file and I have this available for XLSX. And this is kind of a something you probably go through as an admin. I mean, all the admins go through kind of troubleshooting there, just some little mistake that gets made there. So you definitely want to be careful about the extensions you're using there. I'll do this, I added that in the workflow. Let's just create a new document. And I can move that one through in the same way. And if you check the approver, it looks like the QA manager did get written to the data card. Let's see if it got pushed to the file as well. No. All right. Yeah, so it looks like for some reason that's not getting pushed. That's the general process. I'm sure I made some small mistake in there, but I want to keep moving on so we can get through to the word mapping as well. Yeah, it looks like it is getting written there, but it's not being pushed to the file. Interesting. Okay. So that's Excel mapping, and all that information is, again, being filled out for us automatically from the PDM system. And our approver signatures, which is really big for like compliance and automatic or e-signature kind of thing. You can write that directly to the file, so if that file needs to get sent out of the vault or emailed to someone, that'll still have those signatures on that file. And maybe that's a good use for this custom property mapping. Similar thing with Microsoft Word files, but I wanted to show just kind of a quick example on that one just to show you what you can do there. So this is a training file example that I have. I'll go ahead and check it out. So this is just a request that I get from a lot of customers. They're wanting to kind of micromanage a little bit and keep track of who is viewing training documentation in their vault, so they can say, hey, have you, it looks like you haven't viewed this yet. What's going on? You need to read that new documentation. In this case, this documentation is just a file that I got from SOLIDWORKS that it goes over the variable mapping or the custom property mapping process. So I want to keep track of who's using this. First thing I'm going to want to do is a little bit of a different process. I'm going to insert a quick part. So if I hover over that, it's going to say Explore Quick Parts. This one is going to be a field. And this field I'm going to tie to a custom property. And I realize I haven't created the custom property yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Same kind of thing under File, Properties, Advanced Properties, under Custom. Let's create a field called Red. So I read this, or excuse me, a custom property called read. This one, again, you can just add in a value, whatever value you want there, because that'll be replaced later. Say OK. And now we should be able to insert and tie that to a field. And wherever our cursor is where it's going to be inserting this field. So doc property. And I'm going to browse to my new red property. And when I do that, that should update to the value of my field, or my custom property. One disadvantage with Microsoft Word mapping that you don't really see with Microsoft Excel mapping, these fields are actually not going to update automatically when you change the custom property value. So the next time you come into this document, if that custom property was updated by PDM Pro, that value is not going to have been updated. So to kind of get around that, what we want to do is a little bit of, this is where I mentioned the coding process of it. And to do that, what I'm going to do is go to the File menu. File menu, Options, and Customize Ribbon. And I'm going to add in this Developer tab into the ribbon. And when I do that, it'll give me that additional developer option where I can edit the Visual Basic script for this file. And we're going to keep this really simple for this example. Let's see what I have. I'm going to add in private, if I can type, private sub document underscore open, and then two parentheses, or parentheses there. And when I do that, it'll add an end sub to the end of this. So this is saying anytime the file is opened, I want this code to execute in between private sub and end sub. So I'll go ahead and add in my code there, just a one-line thing. I'm going to say activate, active document. And if I do a period there, it'll give me some options to choose from. Don't have to worry about this too much. We're just going to do fields dot update. And that will automatically update our document when we open it. So I'll go ahead and save it. And it'll ask us whether we'd like to turn this document into a macro-enabled template. I don't want to get into that too much, but if we say no here and save this as a docm file, which is a macro-enabled template, go ahead and do that. This is going to be docm. Save it out. And close it. That should be all that's needed for the setup. I can check this file in using my PDM add-in within Word. Oh, I'm sorry, it was checked in already. Let's check it in. Perfect. All right, so that's my training file example. I'm going to do the same kind of mapping as before. So I'll go ahead and edit and add a new variable. This one's going to be red, tying it to the custom property value of red. And I want this to be valid for docm files. Next thing I'm going to do is add that red property to my training files data card. Go ahead and add a field in, or a control in here underneath this users who have read. This one is going to be tied to that red custom variable. I'm going to make that read only so that users can't type in their own name in there. Say save. Sorry, I'm kind of breezing through this a little bit. It's a little bit of the same process as we've already done, so want to make sure we can get through everything here. And under my template workflow, I'm not doing anything to it. Training documents workflow. I do have an example here where the user can, it's kind of a loop. So the user can say, I have read this, and then that should automatically return using an automatic transition, which is what that red transition indicates. So it'll go in this loop every time someone has marked that they have read that file. And when they have read this file, I want an action to be applied to it. So I'll add an action, same kind of thing, set variable for read. And this time what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to set this variable to read. Whatever's in the read variable, I want to keep it, but then I also want to add with a space, I'm going to add the full name of the user who has read it. And so that should automatically keep adding each user's name to this read variable as it moves through. So I'll say OK. Save that out. And that should be good. I think that's everything we need. So I'll go ahead and, just as this training file, just using this file as a training file example, if I right-click that file and change the state and say I have read this, should automatically update with the user's name under that. In this case, I'm logged in as administrator. I'm going to write it to the variable. And then if I check out and open that file, it updates automatically because of the macro that I've added to my Word document. And this will keep going and adding the user's names to this. So if I were to log out and log back in as someone else and make that transition again, it'll add my name to that document. And that's kind of the way that you would add a what they call appending to the variable over time. And that's that all happens in the workflow action for variable, space, and then whatever value you want to add there. And that training document is just one example of where that might be useful, but I can definitely see some other applications for that as well. Hopefully that helps bouncing some ideas around, so you can come up with your own automations and your own workflow processes. All right, we made it. Made it through the just kind of to summarize. I'll go back to the slide there. Made it through SOLIDWORKS. We added and removed our watermarks to our drawings. We updated our title blocks automatically based on the custom properties of the model inside the drawing rather than the drawing's custom properties itself with that PRP sheet mapping. We edited our Microsoft Excel ECO documents with approver signatures and other info like date and customer and all that kind of information so that it minimizes the amount of typing that our users have to do. And really quickly, we added a word mapping so that and macro so that it automatically updates that document with as soon as it's opened with the values in our PDM file. Didn't get to Excel documents today. I kind of run out of time with that. But if you're interested in that, I can post information about that as well. Or if you have questions about that, definitely feel free to add it in the GoToWebinar. And then just kind of a quick plug at the end here. For our Hawkridge Systems PDM services team. I'm a little bit biased since I'm on that team, but we offer really great services for anything and everything PDM related. If you're looking to do upgrades or migrations, or we offer autopilot kind of quick start packages as far as setting up your vault. Definitely really good, valuable stuff there, and that's our website listed, hawkridgesys.com/services/product data management. We also have some developers on staff, so if you're looking at something custom, that's our Hawkware team. Feel free to visit us, our Hawkware team at hawkridgesys.com/product/Hawkware. And we have a really great technical support team. I always like to plug them. If you do have any questions or issues with setting up your vault, or if you're getting any kind of error, they're really great at troubleshooting those kind of issues. So definitely don't hesitate to call or email them. And again, my name is Jake Howard, Product Data Management Specialist here. I put my email over on the right, so feel free to email me if you do have any questions about this. Thanks for tuning in. All right, so that's the basic presentation for those of you that are here live. If you do have any questions for me, I mean, this is a great time to ask them. Feel free to type them in the chat and I can get to those. I don't have anything right now, so if you, but if you do, if something does come up later, definitely feel free to email me. I'm available most days, Monday through Friday, but if it's something more urgent, definitely that Hawk Ridge Systems support is a really good resource for you. All right, if I don't have any questions there, I guess I'll, for those of you sticking around, I guess I did prepare a little bit of something with XML mapping that unfortunately we didn't get to. Basically with XML mapping, just to kind of show it off since wanted to get to that but unfortunately didn't. Basically you can, the advantage to using XML files and why sometimes, in some cases, we recommend using XML over Microsoft Office documents as far as your documentation. There's a couple of different reasons and valid reasons for why you might want that. One of them, automatic updating. So you saw with the Microsoft Word files, those don't update automatically unless you add the macro to them to update those. And then also, with XML, if you're not familiar with those, it's a format that's designed to be both human and machine readable. So using those allows a lot better communication between the Vault and other softwares if they're needing to pull that information. So in this example that I've mocked up here, user can choose from Nike, Adidas, or Reebok. These are just some different shoes that I pulled out off the web. You can say which color you want there. This may be a list that you add for your own Vault, or different kinds of lists. I'm gonna select a size. And when I say okay, it'll generate an XML file that has the specifications for my model. It also comes up with the image depending on what I selected. So this allows me, with XML and XLS files, which I have in my templates folder, that allows you to be a lot more specific about the look and feel of your preview. But if I were to open up this Excel document, or this XML document, it just contains basic data about my file. It doesn't contain the image or anything, so it's not as much human readable, but computers are other systems are much more able to pull that information out of the files than they would for, say, a Microsoft Office file or an Excel file. So definitely some advantages using XML as documents rather than Office files in some cases, especially for specifications and that kind of thing. For more information on any of that, on custom property mapping or XML or Excel or SOLIDWORKS mapping, a really good resource is the SOLIDWORKS online help articles. So definitely searching for that on Google and just saying, SOLIDWORKS help will get you there. I go to there all the time if I'm looking for syntax or any kind of specific setup that I want to make. So, all right, great. Thanks for joining. If you do have any questions, feel free to email me, and I can get back to you on those. Thanks.